Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome H1 CEO Ariel Katz.
Hey everybody, it's great to be here. Ariel, CEO of H1. It's a bit weird, to be honest. I'm used to seeing people in like centimeters. Now I see 3D images of people. I'm getting used to it. My first time at a conference in 2 years, give or take. And I was here 2 years ago, and it was the most fun, so I'm so excited to be back here. I want to start by thanking Samuel and the team for putting this together. I know how much work it is to put together a conference, and it's amazing. And so today, I have about 15, 20 minutes to share a story about how MSLs and medical affairs changed over the past 5 years. What did COVID do to our organization? And what's that going to happen over the next 5 years? At H1, we have the unique advantage of working with over 10,000 MSLs across 84 countries and 100 life sciences companies. And we talk to everybody every single day. We have teams talking to folks in the field, CMOs, VP Med Affairs, Director of MSLs, and we learn a lot about what happened, what changed with COVID, and what they're talking about now, and what's going to change. And I'm excited to share that story. And so to start, I thought, all right, we got to talk about 5 years ago, but it didn't make sense unless we rewind the clock back a bit further, and I'll talk about why. Early 2000s, for those of you, I saw a couple aspiring MSLs, maybe a few people were in the industry back then. It was all about the age of blockbuster drugs, Lipitor, and humongous sales teams. We're talking 10, 20, 30, 40,000 person sales teams. And that was the focus for pharma companies, it really was. MSL teams were there. They were not nearly as big as they are today, and it was a completely different dynamic. And so if you put yourself back in those shoes 20 years ago, era of blockbuster drugs, and commercial was the place to be. That started to change. So 10 years ago, Sunshine came out. Our friends and colleagues on the commercial side had a bit more regulation about what they could do in talking to healthcare professionals. They still left a lot of pens and pamphlets in the office, but they couldn't do as much. And so things started to change. And the biggest change was with the science. 20 years ago, there were blockbuster drugs. Think about that, Humira, Lipitor. 10 years ago, that started to change. All the places we work, we focused on targeted therapy, precision medicine, rare disease, immuno-oncology. Science started breaking through, and medicine started really changing rapidly. And so the idea of going to a doctor's office and leaving a pamphlet and the doctor would start to use that medicine and adopt it wasn't true anymore. It really wasn't, and nobody was listening. And the best people who can engage and talk to these healthcare professionals, everyone in this room, because you all develop peer-to-peer relationships with your healthcare professionals and stakeholders. And so we started seeing a lot of change happen. The idea of having 100-person Salesforce teams and sales reps and knocking on doors, that wasn't working as much. And the idea of developing peer-to-peer relationships and truly educating key opinion leaders, stakeholders, doctors about the latest science and medicine was the future. This wasn't the case 20 years ago, and it started about 10 years ago as medicine and the ecosystem changed. And our goal was to educate healthcare professionals about the latest science and medicine. And so with these two changes, the regulations where sales reps couldn't be as flexible as they used to be, pharma companies realized this, and the change in the ecosystem with medicine changing started the rising tide of medical affairs organization and MSLs. So if you think about 2016, it's actually not that long ago. It's 5 years ago. In 2010, the entire ecosystem flipped on its head, and industry started changing. And so just in 2016, for those of you who remember, the discussion was, how do MSLs and Med Affairs have a seat at the table? Anyone remember those discussions? What is the seat at the table between commercial and R&D and clinical? That was the talking point. Who are the stakeholders? When there were blockbuster drugs, there was one stakeholder. It was a physician. Now, there's care teams, NP, PAs, everyone, patient advocacy groups. So the stakeholder community started to change. We started asking ourselves, all right, what's the seat at the table? Who are the stakeholders? And then social media. There was a question, what's the rise famous social media company? Facebook. Twitter started becoming popular. Doctors started using these platforms. Patient advocacy groups started using these platforms. And so we started asking ourselves, how do we engage and find these digital opinion leaders? So these were some of the questions back in 2016. And medical affairs was on the rise, and MSLs was on the rise. If you think about the trends, the number of sales reps started to decrease a tiny bit. The number of MSLs started to rise like crazy. So 5 years ago, seat at the table, who were the stakeholders, and rise in digital opinion leaders. That was the talk of the town. And that's what happened. We started having a seat at the table. We started having a loud voice at the table. MSL Insights was the thing everyone talked about. We started impacting strategy, clinical strategy, helping find investigators for trials. And medical affairs was changing and becoming super prominent, and the MSL role was becoming more and more prominent. So for the aspiring MSLs, we picked a good profession, as Samuel said. So things were on its merry way. It was working. It was all going well. Technology started advancing in this area. And one big thing happened. Didn't work. COVID. Okay. COVID happened about 2 years ago, from this past March. Also not that long ago. And so all those trends we saw, MSLs had access to KOLs and physicians. MSLs had a seat at the table now. MSLs are engaging with digital and social media and finding digital opinion leaders. This thing accelerated all of that and brought everything forward. Think about what happened. We were all stuck in our living rooms, stuck on our couches, stuck taking care of our kids, the dogs, and everything. And we're all stuck at home, but we maintained access. We could still talk to our KOLs, and that was not true for everybody. Our commercial colleagues, they lost access, which was interesting. If you're a pharma company and you realize, wow, MSLs still are able to engage with KOLs, and they're the one organization that can. They're the one team that's able to still engage with the field, engage with folks who are on the front lines and seeing patients. The other thing that COVID accelerated, you can't be in person, so digital adoption changed a lot. Digital content, how do I engage with people digitally? Digital opinion leaders became even more popular. And so over the past 5 years, a ton has changed. Prominence of MSLs and medical affairs started to rise with change in medicine, complexity in medicine. COVID helped us out. It made our role even more prominent in front of people. We have access, and technology is accelerating. So that's what's changed. That's what happened. That's my story about the past 5 years and a bit further. And today. Today, there's no longer a question, do MSLs and medical affairs have a seat at the table? It's pretty obvious. Everyone knows we do today. It's also becoming a lot clearer about what that seat is and what that role is. We all know that digital opinion leaders are important, and nobody's questioning that it's not just KOLs. It's a lot more than just KOLs that are the stakeholders that we're engaging with today, which makes sense given the complexity in medicine and all the caregivers and all the care teams that touch that patient. So, where are we now, and what's happening? I started by saying I'm sort of cheating, because I get to listen to all these life science companies tell us what they're thinking about, and talk to thousands of MSLs all around the world about the problems that they're facing. So I have a couple predictions. I hope I'm right. I think I'm going to be right on some of these. The first one, our role used to be different. In 2010, our role was data dissemination. There's a phase 3 clinical trial that came out. We're talking to our KOLs about it. We're publishing about it with our publication colleagues, and then we're talking to our payer friends with market access. So medical affairs is all about data dissemination, education about the latest therapies and the work that our companies are doing. That's changing. Talk of the town today are MSL Insights. We're now going to be aggregating information and driving company strategy. We talk to CMOs and CEOs of all these life science companies, and they know the best insights come from everyone over here. And they know it. They say it. They need better ways of getting it quicker. But they all say the same thing. We need more MSL Insights. We need it quicker. We need it to drive our company strategy. And it is. And I mean across the board. You're going to be driving, it's already happening, but you're going to be driving clinical design, patient recruitment, finding investigators, obviously medical strategy, and commercial is going to follow us. We know it the best. And so this is the one big change that's happening. It's already happening, so this is an easy prediction to make. But we're seeing this change across the board and how the discussions are happening. 10 years ago, this was crazy. 20 years ago, this didn't even exist. And so it's all going to change, and it's already changing. So the first one is from data dissemination, us just sharing information, to data aggregation and insight sharing within our organizations. And our seat at the table is company strategy and helping drive it. If you read like any McKinsey 2030 report, talk to any C-suite at these pharma companies, they all say the same thing. And we're seeing it happen as well. The next one, I talked about it a bit. We're seeing really specific ways that you guys are driving execution and not just strategy. Which sites have patients and which investigators have patients? You sort of know it already. You talk to them every day. And you're the only people that do know it. Commercial's not even involved yet. You're the only people in the field talking about it. CRO, I don't know for any CRO friends in here. CROs don't always know the answer to this. You guys know it a lot better. And so we're seeing people go to MSLs to ask, is this a good physician to get enrolled in the study? It's all these types of questions. So we're going to see driving strategy and execution. This one is really important. All of our commercial friends, they have all this technology and all this money. They have commercial analytics teams, or they have all these operations teams. For those of you that work at the top 5 global pharma companies, the change is you're all hiring medical analytics teams now. That wasn't the case 5 years ago. But look at all of your companies today, look at any job descriptions, you're all hiring or already have medical analytics teams. It's changing. You guys are getting larger budgets, more resources, and technology partners like us. We want to build it for you because we know that there's a need. And so the changes that we're seeing from a technology perspective is, number one, you're going to really understand what the educational gaps are in the community. For example, you're going to understand if a physician doesn't or does understand if they should use chemotherapy or 2 immuno-oncology drugs in combination. And you'll know if they do or don't understand that. There's places to get that information. You're going to know if your education's working. You're going to know the sentiment of the healthcare professionals and stakeholders you're engaging with. You're going to know the challenges they're facing. You're going to understand the clinical protocols and guidelines better than you do today. And you're not going to need to Google all this stuff anymore. And so the investment that we saw on the commercial side 20 years ago, it's happening now. We're at like halfway through the marathon of like this transition happening where medical affairs is going to become there's going to be technologies developed specifically for you, just like there was for commercial. And you can see it with all these medical analytics, digital platform teams that are happening across the industry. So this is another change. And then I think the most important one, and we're seeing this too with some of our partners, we're going to understand the impact of your work in a compliant way. I know this is like the red herring, you can't really talk about this, but you can't talk about it if it's not compliant. But I really do think we're going to see this change. And I'll go through some specific examples about this. It's not going to be share of scientific voice, it's too opaque. It's going to be really tangible. And so if you think about what we try to achieve as a team and organization in MSLs, we want to educate healthcare professionals about the latest therapies. We want to make sure they're informed so that patients get the best treatment. So now the question is, how do you measure that? Can you measure that? Pre-approval. You can't look at prescriptions. And so there are some ways that we're starting to do this, and it's really powerful. As an example, there's a team we work with where they have MSLs engaging with primary care physicians and educating those primary care physicians about a certain condition that a patient might display to help diagnose that patient and refer them to a specialist sooner, refer them to a rheumatologist. Best way to know if your work is happening, if you see more referrals to rheumatologists with those primary care physicians you're engaging with. It's totally kosher to measure that, and it's really easy to see that. And if it's not changing, let's ask why, and maybe change our strategy, change the way we're communicating, change what we're communicating. And we're starting to see this happen. Another way is to understand that those educational gaps that I talked about, they're starting to get filled. And you see change in patient treatment. It could be change in a certain procedure, or diagnosing a patient, or using a new technology. This will all be pre-approval, completely compliant. And so we really believe that there's going to be a change, because everyone's asking for it. Everyone's asking us about this. There's really going to be a change to understand the impact of medical affairs and the work that you're doing every single day in a compliant way. And so this is the last biggest change that we see that's going to happen in the industry. So to recap, pharma companies, life science companies, biotech, med tech, med device, they need insights. They need the work that you're doing. They need to understand the experience of a physician, of a patient, of a caregiver, of a nurse who's treating a patient that's sick. And you're the only place they could get it from. And MSLs are going to drive the strategy forward for these companies. And you're going to be the voice. You're going to be the strategic voice in the room. It's going to drive company strategy forward by all these changes that we're seeing already happen. COVID accelerated it, but it was happening already anyways. And it started in 2010-ish because the landscape changed. Medicine changed. No more blockbuster drugs. If there was, we might not all be here today. But that's not the case. Medicine's becoming more complex. Science is becoming more complex. Our role is becoming more important. The ecosystem needs us more and more. And we're going to help drive a lot of the strategy from clinical to commercial to R&D. And it's going to come from us because we're the first in the field and we understand it the most. And we're going to start to really understand the impact that we're having. And we're going to get a whole lot better technology to make that possible. That's what I got for you today. Thank you.